because we're definitely talking astrology more than anything else. I know the topic is like, you know, hippies are reincarnated Mayans, and we'll definitely hit that subject, but there's just not a lot of information other than it's just really cool, the stuff that I've dug up. So this isn't about being very scientific and having any kind of proof that they really have been reincarnated as hippies, although I definitely think it's possible. But basically, I wanted to also, the last couple of lectures that I did here were really even better and more fun and more crazy. So I wanted to give everybody like some really massive discounts that nobody else is getting. A couple people came down to my booth. I went ahead and told them, but right now I'm going to do like half off of a chart session if you get with me before the end of the year. So that saves you about $50. And then also too, the newsletter that I've been putting out, we're now in like 8 different countries. It's going into Europe, it's going into Japan. Japanese love astrology. I don't think they know a word of what I'm saying, but they love astrology, so it's really cool. And it's usually like $20 for a year subscription. If you stop down at my booth, it's only $5. $5 for a whole year. So that's way cool. And if you get a subscription to that, you can also put your name and email address in for a free chart session should your lucky number get picked. Okay? So 307. I am downstairs in 307. I've been there now for years, and they're going to change the number now. So it's 307 this year only. Next year it's supposed to be 317. So I don't know. Change is good, and maybe that's a nice good segue into what we're really here to talk about, and that is we have this inevitable set and series of changes that are occurring to us, and I think we all have the ability to whine, complain, gripe, and get really ticked off, or just realize that we have to kind of go along with those changes. So I'll talk about what really happened with the Mayans, what the planets looked like then, and how it really seemed to coincide with very similar planetary patterns that happened in the 1960s. And the reason why those two subjects are really important is because the same planetary patterns are happening again from 2012 to 2016. And if you don't know the planets already, we're mainly talking about Uranus and Pluto. And yeah, we pronounce it Uranus to cut down on the jokes. And of course, Pluto is really a planet. Because it was Disney, right? Yeah. 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 It's kind of like what was it? Without Pluto, it's just Goofy. Yeah. You know. So if you ever seen Pluto in your chart, you've ever seen the transits or progressions that happen, and you've ever kind of felt hit by Pluto, yeah, you absolutely say, oh yeah, that's a planet. But you know, they redefined what the planets are and how they actually are determined to be a planet. So we really have, in a way, about 7 new planets since 2006, and astrologically, they're probably just as equally as important as all the other planets. The problem, of course, is that it seems to take about 30 years of observing and watching and seeing what happens before we can really get down with what their definitions are. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you what I use them for, how I use them, and how effective they are in the chart, because they really are very significant. And then we'll go over this 2012 to 2016 stuff. And for those of you that are really, you know, getting rid of everything so that you won't be here December 22nd, sorry, you'll still be here. You know, unless you drive on I-75 or I-71, you'll be here. And so I want to make sure I hit everything. My website's the best way to contact me. Telephone allegedly. Got the new cool visual voicemail, so I think most of the problems have been solved. If you've ever had voicemail on your phone and you got to go through 20 messages before you get to the one you want, they have this cool thing now, visual voicemail. So now I can cherry pick and I can get to people faster, but still the website I think is the best bet because it answers all the questions I repeatedly answer on a daily basis. So www.larrymartin.biz, B-I-Z. That's the only part you have to remember. And for those of you that are, how many people study astrology? Okay, now this is the cool part where, because we don't have a lot of time today, if you want to do research and you've got astrology software that'll help you do this, all these charts, instead of handing them out, they're on the website. And all you do is go to that website, click on Events, otherwise known as What's Larry Doing? I try to put the menu on the left, and some people still can't figure that out, so I just have What's Larry Doing? Click that or click Events, and you'll see a free download link to pull these charts up yourself, and you can keep them that way. And that's where we talk about glasses and fine print and all that stuff. But anyway, Mayan calendar. It is round, and I'm not a Mayan calendar expert, but to me, things that are round really don't have a beginning or an ending. So as far as people saying it's coming to an end or something like that, I just think they're misunderstanding it quite a bit, because they refer to that as a baktun, or a changing of the ages. So I really don't want to get into all that detail about what the calendar is or what it means or what it says. But what's fascinating is when you go back and check the origin, or the alleged origin date figured out by people who are experts, to be right around 3114 BC, and you look at the astrological chart of that time, there's a conjunction between Uranus and Pluto. And those are the two planets we'll probably talk the most about today, because they're happening again. Every time they come to a conjunction or they come to a square aspect, we all have to deal with what they represent. And that happens about once every 143 years. So in that span of time, none of us are going to live that long, but we can rest assured we're going to face something to do with those two planets at least once in our lifetime. And we get to face them about 7 times inside of this 4-year span. So for those of you intuiting that we're in for a really big roller coaster ride, well, you're right. It's just a matter of how you're going to choose to look at things. And that's why it's really nice to look at the perspective of the Mayans, because basically they lived and existed a very, very long time. Who knows how long. But what's even more fascinating is right about the end of their existence, or their civilization, right about 836 to 839 AD, there was another conjunction of Uranus-Pluto. At the same time, they experienced 7 severe droughts in a row. And through farming over the same land with the same crop, and refusing to move and refusing to change, they basically died. Those who survived were ones who moved on to more fertile land, tried to find food, water, things I would think it's kind of a no-brainer. But there were many of them who stayed put right in the same area and basically perished. So that becomes kind of like a sad story, I guess, as some things have to seemingly come to an end. But really it was just, I think, people that refused to change. Then you go to 1965, where you see the similar conjunctions come up again. And if you've kept your Mayan calendar origin chart and the Mayan drought chart, which are highly significant, and then wrap the planets around the outside with the elements from 1965 in specifics, where Uranus-Pluto came back together again in Virgo. So all of us born in the 1960s have Uranus and Pluto together in our birth charts. So I thought that was kind of interesting how in my birth chart I've got Uranus and Pluto together, and I'm studying Mayans, and of course 60s are hippies. And it's interesting when you kind of look at that, and then you see what we're facing today, and what all 3 eras have in common is that those civilizations were deluding themselves, honestly. The Mayans just refused to make changes and really insisted on maybe making more human sacrifices or whatever to get the crops to grow and the rain to come, and it didn't work. Well, we could say almost the same thing about hippies. When they first started that movement, especially in California, they weren't just talking about having a Grateful Dead concert. They were really talking about revolutionizing the entire world. That peace, love, and understanding would take over everywhere, and there would be no more war, and there'd be no more conflict, and everybody would just be deliciously happy for the rest of their lives. Well, it didn't turn out that way, but it sounded like a really cool idea at the time. And that's where I think it kind of begs us to kind of figure out, well, what could we possibly have right now in the world today that we're in denial of? What possibly could we be concerned about that we're really not able to do anything about it, or fear that we're not able to do anything about? No, sorry, George W. is not president. Yes, that could have been bad if he was still president. But the whole idea is that any society and maybe any individual who really hunkers down, refuses to change, wants to just try to keep life exactly the way that it was. You had a good year last year maybe and you don't want it to change. It's just inevitable that we have to make these changes. So what Uranus, Pluto are really trying to do, when they combine their energies, people studying astrology know about Uranus being chaos and upset and upheaval and revolution. But really what it is about trust. If anybody knows the mythology about how Uranus was told by prophecy that his children would rise up and betray him, he basically decided, okay, I'll just get rid of my kids, and kill them. So he obviously didn't get all of them, and the prophecy ended up coming true, and he was castrated and blinded and thrown down a bottomless pit. Now, I don't know how else you punish immortal gods, but that sounds pretty nasty to me. And you talk about having a bad day or a bad era. I think the Mayans got off lucky. But it really is about trust. In other words, do you trust yourself? Do you trust those around you that you care about? And are you willing to make changes in order to make some kind of progress for the better? It's not good enough anymore to just say, okay, we had a good year, let's do it again. It doesn't really operate that way. That's why astrology is never going to be able to be proven by the scientific community at all, because in the scientific method, you got to repeat the experiment in order to validate the results. And you can't repeat time. We can see these cycles repeat themselves, and that's exactly what we're studying as astrologers, is that we're studying the beginning and ending of a particular era of time. And so we refer to that as a cycle. And all the different planets have their various distances from the sun. They all have their each individual cycles. But when they blend together, that really creates a huge shift in both consciousness and in the world around us. So when two planets like Uranus and Pluto, who have very different cycles, Uranus is about 84 years, Pluto is like 248. So when they combine every 143 years, it's a significant shift that actually shows us rising ourselves several notches up in technology and in our spiritual consciousness. In other words, there's not too many people that really are real big on the human sacrifice thing. They're still doing that, in other parts of the world, but the majority of us now think that's rather barbaric. So the idea is that we really are making a lot more progress than people give us credit for, but it is time again to make more progress. In other words, what is going on in your life that happens to be a habit that you think is negative or bad or maybe even destructive? Maybe it's not in your best interest. And you do it anyway because, well, I've been doing it for a long time, why not? It doesn't seem to be hurting anybody but myself. And so, not that long ago, we were all talking about cigarette smoking and doing whatever else. And now it's like you can't smoke anywhere except outdoors. So people that are smokers are all still offended. But the bottom line is, we really are getting to a point where we're trying to erase as many bad habits as possible. So we're seeing, like the Arab Spring, when the two planets started to get together in this new aspect, that all these old habits of saying, I don't want to be responsible, let's have a charismatic leader make all the decisions. In other words, the dictatorships of the world are falling, if you hadn't noticed. And the odds of them continuing through to 2016 are slim to none. So while we can say that maybe that's not the way to do it, the idea is about collective responsibility, not just one person solving all our problems. Whether we think it's a dictator or a president of the United States or, God help us all, Congress. The idea is we can't constantly look for other people to solve our own problems. So during the next 4 years, and we can go through all 12 zodiac signs if you want, and those that don't want to, just hide or pretend you're a Virgo.
I am a Virgo.
Okay, we'll do you first then. It's the idea of really looking at this honestly and saying, okay, this is what I happen to be facing. And yes, your birth time is important, but don't worry about that. Your overall birthday on the calendar is more than enough, and if anybody wants to volunteer that, we'll just knock them down each one by one. Okay? So, 7 planets. That's a lot, okay? It used to be that any time that we would discover a new planet, astrologers would see this as a great step forward in consciousness. And honestly, when you go back and look through Wikipedia or anywhere else, you can Google anything now, and you see the distance in time between the different discoveries, you find that we almost never discovered more than one planet in the same year. You know, it was always almost like 100 years apart in some cases. And it was always about a huge shift in consciousness. For example, when we discovered Uranus, that was like the first time we ever discovered a planet with a telescope. In other words, all the other planets were always visible, easy to see. Uranus can be seen by the naked eye, but you got to know exactly where to look, and it's for only a few precious seconds or minutes at the time you can see it. So by and large, you have to use a telescope to find Uranus. But that was at a time when monarchies were really kind of starting to come to an end. And this crazy concept, this revolutionary thought that people could govern themselves started to take place, especially in France and the United States. And the common spoken answer was, that's impossible, it'll never work. People can't govern themselves, they're not intelligent enough, they need divine monarchs to tell them what to do and when to do it. So Uranus was that spark that said, hey, we can do it ourselves. We don't have to rely on somebody else, we can take care of it, and we will. The next time we discovered Neptune, where suddenly we had this discovery of all the things Neptune represents. Petroleum was kind of like this real cool new substance. It seems to make engines go, and it does all kinds of seemingly miraculous stuff, but it's really, really dirty and very toxic. So Neptune rules over all the things that are toxic in the material world, but in the ideal world could be rather dreamy, fantasy-oriented, maybe even idealistic to the point of being able to solve problems other people can't seem to solve. And then we discovered Pluto back in the 1930s, and basically that's been a representation of the nuclear age, where we basically, at the same time Pluto was discovered, we split the atom in half. And then there were asteroids that we've kind of paid attention to on and off. Some astrologers follow them, some don't. But 2 have been reclassified, basically as dwarf planets. And I don't want to get into too much of the astronomy, but in short, a dwarf planet is basically a planet that cannot always clear its own orbit. That's the easiest, simplest way to describe it. That's not the complete definition. If you want that, just Wikipedia it, and you let me know what you think it says. Because I'm open, whatever. But basically, that's the way I understand it, is that some of these, especially asteroids and definitely Pluto, crisscross the orbits of other planets. So since it isn't large enough to clear its own pathway, they call them dwarf planets. And when people say, well, geez, are dwarf planets really planets? And I said, well, I watch Game of Thrones all the time. And if a dwarf has a hammer and he hits your toe hard enough, are you going to say, nope, it never happened, it was just a dwarf? Yes, it still hurts. So those planets considered dwarf planets, I think, have just as much of an impact, but maybe not as much as one, let's say, that rules a zodiac sign. So I think that makes things kind of simpler now, because since 2007, the World Convention of Astrologers have gone back to recommending using traditional rulerships. So the idea then is that Uranus and Neptune and Pluto may have an affinity for the signs we thought they might rule, but I don't give them rulership in the chart, and I found the accuracy of doing progressions and transits just went sky high. So the times in the past where you weren't always sure how you would interpret transit or a progression, if you go back to the traditional rulerships, it seems to just really hit it every time. Yeah.
Pluto has been known for a long time to be a dwarf planet because it does very, very slightly cross the orbit of Neptune.
Right. That's what I was kind of referring to as one example. And also too, they can call it a binary planet if we talk about Chiron, but yeah, who has time for that? When we're all dead and we meet Chiron, the ferryman who carries our soul across the river Styx, then we can talk about him all we want. So, but yeah, thank you. But we also have these bodies now from what they call the Kuiper belt or Kuiper belt that exists beyond Pluto. Because after we got new glasses for the Hubble telescope and we could finally see these things, we actually found a whole lot more planets. We're talking hundreds. Most of them are still given numbers for classification. So what I've been telling my students is that where I draw the line is based on how long I'm going to live. In other words, some of those planets, like we get out to Sedna, which is one of the 7, Sedna takes well over 1,000 years to make one revolution. And I just don't care. I mean, think about it. If you're going to study something, let's say you do research and you want to go back 3,000 years, well then by all means go ahead, plug it on in. The software can do it because it's just a number or a series of numbers in orbits, and the software will go ahead and punch it out for you. I just can't see how I can sit maybe with a client one-on-one and discuss, what kind of job they might have 1,000 years from now. It just doesn't seem to really register for me. So I like to stop about Eris. Eris usually will go through, one zodiac sign, maybe 2 in a lifetime. So I think 2048's the next time it moves from Aries into Taurus. And that'll be about all when none of us in here care. So that's where I kind of look at Eris and see how it is an instigator and a very disruptive type of influence. And we'll work our way back toward the sun here. Eris is the furthest one out besides Sedna. Sedna is a little further. Sedna is Sedna. And she's basically, long story short, an Inuit tribe goddess that basically helps out people that are frozen and helps them eat and do other things. Again, well, I was in Arizona. I came here, saw the weather forecast, thought I better look up Sedna because I just thought it was way too cold. But all in all, I don't worry too much about Sedna or really get into it. The others I do. And Eris is the next one in, E-R-I-S. And for those of you not up on things, Eris's glyph is hard for me to do on the dry marker board. But it's basically 2 half moons facing away from each other and a third line right in the middle. That's probably the better way to do it. No, Pisces looks like the 2 moons with a horizontal line through the middle. But Eris is actually the old glyph for the Church of Discordia turned sideways or turned vertically. The old Church of Discordia, that's fun if you ever got into conspiracy theories, which is kind of fun to twiddle around with and Google this. The Church of Discordia was a real church who believed in disruption. To literally go around and create revolution and upset monarchies and tick off the king and play Robin Hood and stuff like that. And as you can guess, they didn't last very long. But they must have had a lot of fun. That's the way I looked at it.
They couldn't decide on a leader.
Yeah. Boy, wouldn't that be like a practical joke? Yeah. You'll be the leader of our Church of Discordia. Joe, kill him. That's why they didn't last very long, exactly. So anyway, that's where the glyph for Eris comes from. And she was Mars' sister. And she was always excluded, never allowed to join in with any of the other goddesses. And there's a lot of different stories about her, but the one I think that's the most famous one is where they left her out of this wedding. And so she created this golden apple that said, "For the fairest of them all." Sorry, no, Disney didn't write that one actually. But she did, in Greek mythology, created this golden apple, and she snuck over to the wedding anyway and hid in the bushes and then rolled the apple among the feet of all the goddesses. Athena, Hera, Venus, they were all there. And of course they all leaned over, picked up this gorgeous golden apple and said, "For the fairest of them all, oh, it must be for me." And they all fought over the apple. So ultimately they go to Zeus, let him decide who gets the apple. And of course he says, "Well, I didn't get to be king of the gods for nothing. I'm not stupid, I'm not going to do this. Why don't you take the apple down to Paris, down on Earth, he'll decide which one of you gets the apple." So they go down to Paris and they bribe him with everything they could possibly think of. Athena's offering him powerful weapons that can destroy all his enemies. And Hera's like, "Well, I'll help you to change the weather anytime you feel like it." But of course Venus, a little smarter, she goes, I'll give you any woman on the planet you want. You pick her, she's yours. And of course, Paris is like, she's the winner. And chooses Helen of Troy, which happens to be married to his archenemy. And thus the Trojan War begins. So Eris, I don't give credit for starting the Trojan War. But Eris is an instigator. And you think about the times when we discovered Eris, about 2006, 2007. You kind of noticed politics, sensitive subjects we used to never talk about. Now they're in the news all the time. And now we're finding ourselves really irritated with people that don't have an opinion. People sitting on the fence. Oh, I don't know who I'm going to vote for. Probably doesn't matter anyway. You're seeing a lot of people get kind of riled up now. I mean, I personally don't think the candidates running for president are any more exciting than they were 10 years ago. But everyone's got an opinion, and everybody's deciding. Can't remember the last time I heard this. If Romney's elected, I'm moving to Canada. If Obama's re-elected, I'm moving to Canada. All I can think of is that Canada is going to grow by 300 million people. One way or the other. It's like, damn, you guys better all learn hockey rules. If they ever play again. And that's what Eris does. Eris pokes, prods, irritates. But I don't think it's necessarily all negative. You know, it's kind of like, well, you know, the person who sits there and goes, well, I don't really know what I want to do for a living. Hey, you're 49, figure it out. You know, that's what Eris would say. Figure it out. Go get a job. Don't stand there going, I don't know what I'm going to do. But that's what Eris does, okay? Now, the other two are a little more complicated, not widely written about, but we basically have started running out of names for Greek and Roman goddesses and gods. So basically, Mike Brown, the guy who discovered these bodies, since the discoverer gets the choice of naming the body he discovers, starts getting a little strange, but I think it's kind of cool. The next one in is Maki, M-A-K-E, M-A-K-E. I always think it's like mahi. I think if somebody says mahi to me, I think fish. You shouldn't have to tell me twice. Well, Maki looks a little confusing, but he discovered it on Easter Sunday. So he went to Easter Island and their mythology, and one of their top divine beings is called Maki. So it looks like make, but to me that sounds like an episode of Honey Boo Boo. So I don't think we should pronounce it that way. I like Maki. It sounds somewhat intelligent, okay? But Maki is about divine communication. Nothing like Mercury, which is basically just, you know, the mailman trying to deliver the mail. Maki is kind of like, you've got mail. And you're like, it's not on me. It's in cyberspace, or it's in my computer, or it's something someone was just thinking and I picked up on it. In other words, it's like a psychic type of planet that really has an upward echelon of vibration to it. In other words, it's not down here saying, oh, I've got to look at this piece of paper somebody wrote me. It's now texting. It's now email. It's now, the coolest thing, because in Arizona you can't text and drive anymore. That's actually worse than a DUI. But we've got really good voice recognition, which we never had before. You know, before I was scared to death. If I said something, I had no idea what the other person was going to read. You know, they're going to say, wow, well, I'm breaking up with him tomorrow. Now I've actually checked it over 50 or 60 times. It's been right on. So I think that's pretty cool. But that's another example of Maki. In other words, the communication now transcends time. And we've never had that before, like ever. You know, it used to be you had to use, you know, Western Union, hope they get it. We've had a peace treaty now for 13 years. Don't shoot Jerry anymore. And you hope they get it. Well, now it's like, man, I can send an email to my buds in Japan. It's there in fractions of a second. You know, it used to be when you had the dial-up, you're sitting there going, oh, I hope he gets the email. And even then, that was pretty spectacular. But still, we're whiny now. It's like if our computer even hesitates for a second, we all start whining and throwing things. So Maki has this divine communication coming in. So that's where that goes. The next one is, yeah, go ahead. McKee. Oh, wow. See, I'm trying to like memorize all this stuff. So don't quote me on this. But this is what they're using for right now. Seriously, this is exactly how I draw. Like a stick man. It's something like that, where it's literally like a stick figure. I keep thinking of hangman, you know. It's kind of like if I don't get the vowel, you know. But yeah, it's something like that with a cross in the upper circle and then a cross in the middle to kind of make this man of communication. I don't think everyone's in agreement on that glyph, but they are in all agreement on Eris. And I think it's going to take a little while, I think, for everyone to catch up to that. The other one is Haumea, which is a Hawaiian goddess. Haumea. And she is more or less associated with creation. In other words, super creativity that helps everybody around you. In other words, Venus was always the planet of creativity in the past, but that's more like watercolors, you know? It's more like sculpting. It's more like saying, okay, this is a pretty picture of a house. Let's go with that. Haumea is creativity that furthers the human race, or it furthers your community. It benefits anyone and all. And the only myth I remember was one terrible time, I guess after a typhoon, I guess it would be, in Hawaii, where their food supply was wiped out. And the people were starving. And Haumea rose up out of the ocean and stood on the beach, had this magic staff, and she, you know, slammed it on the ground, and all these fish just jumped right up on the beach and fed everybody. And I kept thinking, wow, I've heard that story before in a slightly different way. But this, of course, is more divine feminine. And that's where I think we're going with Haumea, is that as we move into the age of Aquarius, which is much more gender neutral, we're now seeing almost an end to the patriarchy that's been going on for a few thousand years. And we're starting to see the rise of women's rights, the rise of femininity. You know, guys actually are allowed to cry now. I saw it in the news. But the idea of Haumea is to see exactly how you can operate from the heart rather than the head. And there's a whole kind of discussion we could have for a whole afternoon on that subject. Because a lot of us, anybody familiar with Jerry and Esther Hicks? They got their bestseller to hit #1 when Haumea was discovered. So if you're familiar with their work, and they're actually from Phoenix originally, Jerry's passed on, but Esther's still rocking. But they're talking about law of attraction and, most importantly, the emotional guidance system. You know, that gut feeling you're talking about. I've never seen too many people really write about that with really a clear message. I always thought that was vague at best, but they seem to do the best job on it when they said, if you feel happy, joyous, jubilant, excited, then you should do that, whatever that is. I'm assuming it's legal. And if you feel anxious, scared, depressed, angry, then that's probably something you shouldn't be doing. And that probably is illegal. But that's kind of the idea, that we don't always have to just rationalize with our brain to come up with some equation. You know, should I be doing this on Friday night? No. I missed Friday night doing this damn equation. In other words, we need to be doing more from our hearts. We know right from wrong, but we need to kick it up a notch. That's what Haumea is telling us. That basically we need to really get honest about how we're really feeling and learn to really communicate that and make things happen in a more heartfelt way. You know, so all of that's fascinating stuff. Invite anybody to visit my website. I don't have a lot written on those planets, but email me, it'd be a lot quicker. And I can send you some text, some things I'm working with to help you look at your own chart. And if you don't know where those planets are for yourself, you can stop by my booth, leave me your email address, and I will email you a free copy of your chart with those planets on it. Okay?
Now the planet, the first one, Sirius?
Yes. The asteroids that are now planets, as we're going inward, we got what, two more here? Pluto, we've done enough. We'll skip Pluto. But the other two are Ceres, C-E-R-E-S. And pardon me, I don't have the glyph for Haumea memorized. It's kind of complicated. To me, it looks like a Reiki symbol, you know.
That looks like the sign for Astaroth.
What could be? But Ceres is actually Saturn kind of upside down. And Ceres, C-E-R-E-S, her Greek name is Demeter. She's the goddess of nature. Remember the old, well, let's see, is everybody in here? Yeah, if everybody remembers the old Imperial margarine commercial, where they're trying to pass off the margarine as butter, and she figures it out, and then lightning comes down, it's not nice to fool Mother Nature, that's Ceres. Anything that's not organic or natural, dead to her. So she basically rules over our diets, our ability to exercise, and we have time for a quick myth story? Yeah, I guess we do. Real quick. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of Ceres, with my favorite story. She basically governs over nature, governs over what we should or shouldn't eat. And the fact now that they've raised her to planet status, or dwarf planet status, I think is awesome, because everybody now getting rid of trans fats and the law, they're making that a law, for God's sakes. You know, I mean, that's like, wow, laws for food? Cool, you know? I'm tired of MSG and all that stuff. But anyway, the story was this arrogant general was coming home from a victorious battle and pretty much had all his men intact, siege engines, catapults, you know, the whole 9 yards. And they entered into this very narrow valley to which they almost have to go single file in order to make it through. But that's the quickest way home. It's about another month's march around the valley to go any other way. And so basically they get to the middle of the valley, and there's a huge oak tree in the middle of it. And the arrogant general looks at it and says, "Men, take it down." Well, the minute they just even get within 5 feet of it, all these woodland creatures come up, probably Disney creatures, and they all say, "You can't chop this tree down. This belongs to the goddess Ceres. And if you chop it down, it's all over for every one of us." And then he's like, yeah, goddess, schmoddess, whatever. Cuts the tree down anyway. Men go ahead on through the valley, where at the end of the valley, a certain goddess is waiting with that imperial margarine. And she's pissed. She is so pissed off, because here is this mechanization, for all you Lord of the Rings fans, we all know what that is. You know, it's like Saruman coming through with the orcs, defiling Mother Nature. And she curses him, just curses him, because he won't even speak to her, basically. And she curses him and says, "Forever after, whatever you eat will never sate you. You'll never get any nutrition from it. You'll basically just waste away." He's like, yeah, right, get out of my way. So they go on home with their spoils of war, and he literally finds himself eating constantly, but not gaining any weight. In fact, he's actually losing weight. And eventually he sells his own daughter into prostitution to afford more food, because he's still hungry, and literally eats himself to death. And it's interesting how we're now being very conscious of things like bulimia or anorexia or digestion situations. You know, Prilosec is one of the most, eaten drugs out there for people with infinite chronic heartburn. And I mean, I live in Arizona. We just quit eating the peppers for a while, you know? It's like, hey, a little less tequila there, I think you'll be better. In other words, it really is more about us getting back to nature and cutting out the preservatives, the chemicals, all the stuff that might be in food, GMOs, all that stuff. I mean, the side effects I've read from that stuff is horrifying. I mean, it would lead me to believe, remember Olestra? See, I'm from Cincinnati. And that was like this breakthrough chemical. We can throw it on stuff and no one will gain weight.
Yeah, it just moved on through.
Oh, it moved on through. It's like, you better not have plans for the next couple hours after you have that bag of chips. And it sounds exactly like that story written 2,300 years ago. 2,300 years ago. That's where I look at stuff like the Mayan calendar and that, and I see those conjunctions, and then you see this really nasty chart I've got. You can get it from the website for free on the droughts they went through. They had to be horrible. We're not just talking about lack of rain, we're talking about starvation. No water to drink. And you stand around hoping and praying that it's going to rain? You know, it just doesn't make any sense unless you've been stuck in these habit patterns for so long, you've forgotten how to think. And that's what really gets disturbing. You know? So you look at these patterns, these cycles keep repeating, and it just bears witness, I think, that we have to pay attention to this stuff. So Ceres, I think, is just a fantastic planet to look at because it shows where you are nourished in your chart. Like mine's in Sagittarius. And ever since I could remember, you could lose me in a library for days, and I would just be lost in one section or another and never come out and forget to eat. Because Sagittarius is all about knowledge and higher learning, and that's where Ceres is in my birth chart. That feeds me. It feeds me. It nurtures my soul. So whatever zodiac sign you have Ceres in nurtures your soul. It really gives you not just something worth living for, it makes you excited about it. So it really brings a charge back into your life. And then the other one is Vesta. Vesta, I keep thinking about this as some kind of valley with a flame above it. And Vesta it's about passion. You know, it's about the things that give life meaning. It's a heartfelt symbol, absolutely. Again, we're talking about this divine feminine that's actually coming back and really rebalancing even how we read astrology charts. Because, you know, even though we might think in a patriarchal way, or at least we did when we were children, you know, who can really argue about Ceres? Very important planet. I don't even use dwarf anymore. It's a planet. Dwarfs are people too, you know? But Vesta's about passion. What gets you up in the morning? Well, besides coffee. At least that works for me. But I mean, you know, you want to be doing something with your life. You know, all of us have gone through those periods in time where we worked for a paycheck. We got a job because we had to pay the bills. Well, aren't we beyond that yet? You know, aren't we in the need of really doing something we're passionate about? In other words, somebody that's going to hire someone now has a stack of resumes, at least a foot deep. They can hire anybody with a 4.0 if that was the criteria. But the person that's going to get the job is the one with passion, the one with heart, the one that knows that they can do the job, but that they really want to show up on Monday morning. God knows why, but you know, it has to be a subject that they're passionate about. Vesta shows where you're invested in, what you're invested in. So really, it's kind of like a whole new way of looking at astrology, or at least that's the way that I do it. And I still use a lot of Far Eastern methods because I'm fascinated by past lives and stuff like that. There's no way to really prove that, but it tells some interesting stories. That every time I look at like the North Node and the South Node and any planets that are around that, and I tell the story of where they may have been in past lives, for 25 years now, I've had people sit there going, wow, I've always felt that. Can't prove anything, but it's very interesting and it sheds some light where otherwise you might not have wondered or you might not have figured out why you did some of the things that you do. So that's really, really cool stuff. So I think we got enough time for, questions or all 12 signs for the next 4 years. Your choice. 12 signs? Oop, sorry.
Yeah.
Here's your number one.
Okay, we'll do that. What was your question, real quick?
Very common I want to make was you said something about when was the last time people said they wanted to move to Canada.
Yeah.
Think about the hippies who was president.
Well, yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, to not go to Vietnam. You know, the conscientious objectors burned their draft cards, went to Canada.
So does that mean all the Mayans are up in Canada?
They could be. Canadian Mayans?
And so did John Lennon.
See, that's where curling came from, I think. They used to be heads. I swear to God, I never even knew what that sport was until like 4 years ago. Yeah. It's like, that's really cool. It's like shuffleboard on ice. So now we're talking, you know. It's kind of like things like golf, you know. Shuffleboard's kind of boring, but you put it on ice, it's different. Golf, put it on ice. You know, it'd be a totally different game. It'd be exciting. I'd actually watch. Wouldn't you?
Yeah.
There's Tiger Woods. Oh, he fell. Hit himself in the head. Okay, anyway. Next 4 years, we're basically looking at Uranus-Pluto stuff, breaking our habits, whether we want to have them broken or not. Virgo, which, by the way, if you're keeping count at home, it's the 6th sign. Okay, but we'll just go around that way. It doesn't matter. Virgos, and I make fun of all 12 equally. I pick on everyone, I swear. But Virgos are always very picky, critical, able to see detail to a minute degree, and they need to ask themselves exactly what do they really want to accomplish, because Pluto is going to be in their favor while Uranus will not be. So it really boils down to what do you want to change out of your life that you've been putting off? Because Virgos always procrastinate because they're waiting for it to be perfect. Well, it never is, but it sounds good. Well, this is what I'm going to do someday when it's perfect, when I have enough money, when I have the cool car, when somebody has a sale. So the procrastination could be a bad habit that you could see getting broken, okay? So seventh sign is Libra, okay? And Libras are all about relationships and balancing things out and pleasing other people and trying to extract appreciation as if you're going to do it as a surgical technique. You will thank me. No, they're really nice. They're nicer than that, and they may be too nice, okay? But Libra is going to be not favorable to either planet during these 4 years. Libras are going to have it rough if they haven't already. In other words, Saturn's already spent 2 years there. So if you're a Libra, you've been pounded on rather severely. In other words, anything you were unhappy about, unorganized about, anything that you were thinking of 7 years from now, if it isn't going to be there in 7 years, whether you know it or not, it was taken from you over the last 2 years. That could have been people, places, or things. And especially things like jobs. Okay? So now Libras get a break now that Saturn has left the sign. Back on October 5th of this month, it went into Scorpio. So Libras get kind of a break, but it's not a long break. You're going to have to really look at your chart. You're going to have to learn your chart and really kind of cherry pick when you're going to do things. Because otherwise you're going to feel really, really picked on. Because what Pluto is doing is it's taking away things that really weren't all that great to begin with. But, you know, Libras are always wanting grace and peace and quiet. And even though they didn't like that person, they just won't break up with them. Well, Pluto comes along and just makes them 3 feet shorter. It just seems unfair. Isn't it? I always tell the Libras sitting there going, I'm sitting perfectly balanced. Oh, not now. I'm screwed. I'm screwed. I do promise, I don't think I've ever really said that. I may have thought that before when a client calls in. Oh, my chart, look at my chart quick, Larry. Oh my God, what do I do? You're screwed. I've never done that, but yes, I've thought that. Send me the check first, then I'll tell you you're screwed. They don't send the check if you tell them they're screwed. But the other part of it is Uranus. In other words, Libras don't like upset. Libras don't like to yell. They don't like to speak up. They don't like to upset the apple cart. Uranus is going to do exactly that. It basically says that there's something in your life that's not working, hasn't been working, will never work, and you can't fix it. And Libras don't like to admit that, but I would wholeheartedly encourage you, look at it. Because it's got to go, you know. Yeah. So even though you could have been, what was the old joke was, Libras don't bury the dead. It's kind of like, Grandma was your favorite, but you know, that was 10 years ago when she died. You might want to think about moving her out of the garage. Which Scorpios really love that. Scorpios love those jokes. Yeah, they like the dead people and the dead things and crawling around in mysteries and all kinds of unknowns.
Wait, oh, that's true.
Yeah, you do. I ain't going to talk about where you've been. Scorpios, though, actually are going to do fairly well with this planetary combination. Because again, we're talking about other planets that are all going to be in very heartfelt zones. And Scorpios, you know, you can criticize them all you want, but they're passionate. You don't have to wonder where they stand. They got an opinion on everything. And they're not going to sit around and wait for you to figure it out. They'll tell you right off. And they already know you don't like them, so they don't care. Now, Sagittarians, they care. They want to vocalize things, and they want to tell you all about it. I had this scary thank God brother-in-law, who was a Sagittarius, and I swear to God, he had a master's in engineering, an MBA, and wanted to get a third master's degree in some totally unrelated subject. I mean, typical, but he was also working as a computer scientist over at, it begins with an LEX, not too far from here. And he was the type of person that would say, he literally would say this at least once every 5 or 10 minutes. Let me tell you about it. And it didn't matter what the subject was. It could be the price of yak's milk in Tibet. And he'd sit there and tell you all about it and why the trade was up the other day. And the sick part about it was you'd look it up and he's right on. Like, how in the hell, John, did you know about the price of yak's milk in Tibet? Oh, it's something I study in my spare time. They always know what's going on. And so Sagittarians are going to actually find themselves feeling really important over the next 4 years because basically they're going to focus for the first time maybe ever on one subject. And they're going to do it really, really well. And they're going to have a lot of success at it. The only problem is they're going to tell everybody about it. So, and forget that the rest of us really don't care. Now, Capricorns have it rough, okay? Pluto's in your sign. You've known that now for 5 years. And still they don't seem to hear at least my message, if not just a random horoscope book, where they basically tell everybody, hey, Capricorns have to completely redo your life. Completely. In other words, whatever you used to be doing, you're not going to do it now. You're going to do something totally different. Whatever you thought your life was going to be, it's not now. It's going to be something completely different. And they don't seem to get the part of the word different. They seem to feel as though destruction, mayhem, the end of things is all they basically are living for. And that's just not the case. They just have to realize that their old way of seeing the world is done, and now they have to look at it a different way. Aquarius, looks like we have to speed things up here. So I'll go through faster. If you want more information, I'm down at 307. You can sign up, have your chart done, or whatever's available. Aquarius, weirdest sign of the zodiac. That's my sign. We wear weird colors. We talk about astrology. We like to do things different, do things our own way, or the hell with it. We just won't do it at all. It's like, well, but that's the way you get to that town. Nah, screw it. I'm not going. Unless I can go a totally different way, I'm not going. But where the planets are going to be for Aquarius works really well for changes. Any change you want to make, which we seldom want to make a change, will work out. It just will. And the problem is you're not going to be able to think it through, and you're not going to be able to prove to yourself it really will work. You just have to do it on faith and figure it out as you go along, which Aquarians are really good at doing. But it's not going to be obvious, it's not going to be clear, and it's not going to be, right there in front of your face. It's going to be something you're just going to have to work with because Aquarians have to develop their hearts a lot more. So again, look at your chart. Then for Pisces, well, they are, I think, one of the signs that's kind of screwed. Because Pisces are very sensitive people, but they want everything perfect, and they have this concept of how to make it perfect. They just can't seem to communicate it. And so where some of the planets are going, especially Uranus, it's almost throwing their finances into a blender. And all of a sudden they've got money, then they don't. Got money, then they don't. And it really takes a wild roller coaster ride for Pisces to realize, oh, damn, this isn't the merry-go-round. So Pisces have to try to find a way to have a plan. I think that'll work, okay? Have a plan, write it out. Don't ask your friends. They don't know what the hell you're talking about. They never have. So write the plan down, try to follow the plan, okay? Aries. I think Aries are going to totally rock. Uranus is in their sign, and Uranus is saying, change now. Well, of course, that's not fast enough for Aries. So I think the Aries people are basically just going to assert themselves, say, hey, this ain't working, get rid of it, do something different. Tauruses. Tauruses, I think, can manage. I think they'll do okay. In fact, they're going to be the wise oracles for the next 4 years because they're going to, plod slowly along like they always do and do things very carefully and very slowly. And everybody else that feels like their life has become a train wreck will start to ask them for advice. In other words, how do I slow down my life? How do I start being more consistent? How do I build something that lasts? And that's all Tauruses ever do. Build something that lasts forever. It's like their favorite chair. They never leave their favorite chair, ever. And where these planets are moving and shaking things is more like, okay, isn't it time for an upgrade? Well, how do you do that? Believe it or not, the Tauruses will have that plan, they'll have that method, they'll get it done, but not in the same time frame as everybody else. So as long as Tauruses quit caring about the rest of the human race, they will succeed. Otherwise, people just keep calling them names. Geminis, they're another sign I think that's screwed. Because Geminis are constantly thinking up all these different plans, and they're all awesome plans, but they don't know which one to pick. So I would say, get a dartboard, fill out all your ideas on there, and then like Uranus would want you to, cover your eyes and just throw a dart, and then do it. Don't just ignore it, put it off, do things that Virgos might do, wait for it to be perfect, because you don't have time. Geminis won't have time. They won't have time for anything. So they need to get visual voicemail, get more gadgets, more cool phones. You know, Geminis love the cool gadgets, just like the other air signs. And then, what do we got left? Cancer. Are we going to make it? Maybe. Cancers. Totally screwed. Because Cancer's always into family situations, keeping everybody together. Let's make everybody safer, feel more secure. They're everybody's mom, they're everybody's dad, and you know, they just try to make the peace. Well, Pluto's opposite their sign, and Uranus is squaring them. In fact, you know, we live in a Cancerian country, and we're screwed the next 4 years, if anybody hadn't figured it out. In fact, April 21st, 2014, if you want to call that the end of the world, I'm halfway there with you. Because basically that's when Pluto itself will be opposite the American sun for the first time in our history. And I've talked about this last year and the year before, but the bottom line is we can't keep operating the way that we are. You know, with technology skyrocketing and making our lives faster and faster and faster, and we can't get a government to really agree on anything. You cannot operate that way. And even if we're not talking about the economy, we can't operate that way. We have to find a new way of looking at government and finding another way of getting along or coming to some kind of mutual agreement. Because it's like, geez, you know, can't you guys just vote on something even if it's wrong? You can't do that indefinitely. And so that's where these planets are going to really hammer on Cancers. In other words, what's going on in your own family that nobody's talking about, or nobody's willing to fix, or nobody's willing to do something with crazy Uncle Fred? It's time to do something with crazy Uncle Fred. And Cancers, maybe they need to step up and be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more assertive, because otherwise they're going to be nervous or ill or have all kinds of problems, especially with digestion, which is where everything goes for Cancers. And then we got Leo, and that's the last one, right? I think Leos are going to do great because they're going to be the only one laughing at the rest of us. Because they're always playful and want to be playful. And finally, after the last few years, which their lives have been really hard lately, they've even broken nails and had to change clothes and do all kinds of stuff they'd rather not do. But now all of a sudden they're kicking back going, screw it. Who cares? I'm going to Canada. Anyway, thank you guys. We appreciate it.